Bienvenidos a un episodio más de Reinventándonos podcast, un podcast donde invitamos a personas que se están enfrentando a un cambio organizacional o bien nos están dando herramientas para reinventarnos hoy en el futuro. Pues hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial y es muy curioso porque también me encuentro grabando desde otra parte de México que es Mérida, para los que han estado por aquí. Es un lugar muy bonito, Mérida, México. Y bueno, también pues tenemos un clima totalmente distinto. Entonces, bueno, a los que vean por video van a ver un poco la diferencia digamos, el panorama habitual. Y hoy nos están visitando desde Ámsterdam, desde Países Bajos, Jeroen Kraaijenbrink. Él tiene una gran preparación entre la parte académica, la parte de consultor, y bueno, nos encantó su formación y nos encanta porque es un apasionado de la estrategia y la implementación de la misma en las organizaciones. So welcome to the show, Jeroen.
Yes, thank you for introducing me. I must admit my Spanish is not that very well developed, but I understood a few words. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this episode will be in English, so to our listeners, to our audience, they're used to, and we are so happy to have you here in these beautiful days. So we want to start with a checking round, so to follow our tradition, and I don't know. We want to know you a little bit more, so we want to ask you. What is a hobby of you that you really enjoy, even you dedicate time or considerable time?
Yes, making music in two different ways. I think
Wow.
I've been playing the trumpet for a very long time, like since I
Wow.
was 8. But very recently, I've starting to join a choir and kind of use my voice as an instrument as well, which is a
Wow.
completely new experience to me. So that's what keeps me busy in my free time.
Wow. Well, here in this in this podcast, we love music too. I play the
Ah,
bass, so we have
great.
we have musicians. So for me, also a good hobby, and I also love to run. I'm a runner, so I like a lot, and I kind of take a good rest of my daily uh, activities running. So I love to run. But
Mhm.
awesome. I think, well, we have some musicians guest in this podcast, but as a hobby, we don't have it yet. So that's awesome. That's good to know,
Yes.
Jeroen.
Mhm.
Well, so you have a great expertise and experience, and when we saw your curriculum, your expertise on LinkedIn, really get of engage with you, and you are kind of you are a co-founder of a consultancy that is called Strategy.Inc. You are a freelancer. You write also in Forbes. You are an
Mhm.
associate professor. Uh, I don't know if all this work is kind of a virtuous loop or is something that helps you also as a consultant, as your main activity.
Mhm.
Uh, Sometimes we also listen to people that, oh, you have to be focused only in one thing. You can only do one thing.
Mhm.
So what you think are the pros and cons of your expertise or your activities you do in your daily day?
Yeah, sure. So I would agree and disagree with the advice to say stay focused because I
Mhm,
do have a focus. It's strategy
mhm,
and leadership. So mainly
mhm,
strategy and increasingly also leadership. So the topic wise, so expertise wise, I do focus. But for the rest, I can only work if I have a broad portfolio of different activities.
mhm,
On the one hand, because otherwise I get bored. If I would only do consulting, I would get bored. If I only would write, I would get bored. If I only would do research, I would get bored. So for me, it's a way of keeping it interesting, to have these very different activities during the week at the same time.
mhm,
But also, and that's what you refer to as well, is it also feeds into each other. It strengthens each other, because the reason I'm currently able to do what I do is because I have done, I've seen the research part of strategy, I've seen the teaching part of strategy, the consulting part, the implementation part. And you really see how the experience in one way of working feeds into the rest. So I think altogether that makes me a richer strategy and leadership expert, if you like to use that word, because I've worked with the same stuff from so many different angles.
Nice. Yeah, it's like, I love it that you say like everything fits, like everything is linked between each, and I love it. I think that that makes you more complete consultant.
Yeah, and it's not that this was like a plan. I haven't planned it this way like 20 years ago that I thought, okay, this is going to be my career. First, I'm going to be in academia, then I'm going to be a consultant, then I write. And no, it's more organic, and that's also how I work. So next steps will probably also be more organic and just see whatever opportunities come up that fit into what I do. So for me, it's a bit like surfing. I'm not a surfer at all, but how I imagine it to be, there's kind of waves coming your way, and the good waves that fit, you pick those, and those bring you a bit further, and so you jump from one wave to the other, and kind of proceed your career in that way.
Lovely. And one of I completely agree with you, and I think that keeps you also like active, and like also sort of maintain you focused, because you are always like, oh, what's next, what is doing. So I love the analogy you do with the surfer. And also another thing that I love it, and it was that, and sounded completely with us, is like that you focus on to strategy and also to implement. And we bring into collision this because we see that not all consultants do a strategy, not all consultants implement, or only do workshops, or only do keynotes or research, that, and they do it good. I mean, it's not like something like, oh, you are not good enough. But also we see that many organizations have problems with do a strategy and implement. So I don't know what is the main cause. You find something like why we are failing to do a strategy, or why many people, when you talk strategy or implement, you say, oh, okay, no, let's do business as usual, and don't
so how long do we have? This is kind of my entire career is about this. So there's many reasons why there is so much failure and so many problems in between strategy and execution. And there has been a lot of research over the past 4 or 5 decades showing that the problems are kind of consistent. Like 40 years ago, they were the same as now. But if I would summarize it in the shortest possible way, it's kind of the systematic split we have created between thinking and doing, between strategizing and execution. And you see that in an organization where the thinking is supposed to be done at the top of the organization, and then the doing, the execution, somewhere downwards. So strategy formulation still happens quite a lot with the top of the organization. And once it's done, it's kind of thrown over the fence, hoping and telling people, now execute. So that's a split in organizations, but it's also a split in time. It's like, first we spend a lot of time on analysis and on planning and on creating a great strategic plan, and then we execute. So also in time, we make this split. And it's this kind of systematic split between strategy and execution, I think, is causing many of the problems. And if you look at what I do myself as a consultant, I have to start with admitting that my main expertise, my strength, is in the very front end. So I think I'm a much better strategy design and formulation consultant than a strategy implementation consultant. But the way I work with clients is to always approach this as a complete process, which means that when we start, we do anticipate like, okay, this has to be executed. So we also have to think about how executable is this strategy. So for me, the focus is always very much on creating strategy that is executable. So really on this in between phase, because many strategies when developed, they are too high level, too vague. And when you read them, then you say, okay, very interesting, impressive, but what does it mean? What do I have to do now? So in order to facilitate execution, we also need to make sure the strategy is clear enough, it's concrete enough, that people can understand what it means, that you help them understand what it means for them, that it's pretty detailed in the end, not just high-level objectives and statements, but clearly laying out what does it really mean. So that's where my involvement in quite a few cases even stops with a client. And also some cases I really help with the implementation or designing the implementation organization. But even when we just do the first phase, by focusing on strategy that's executable, I already try to help them really facilitate the implementation.
Lovely. And also, well, we want to put this information of you and all your links in our intro and of bio that we share with our audience. But I love it, and congratulations and thank you at the same time that you share your there in LinkedIn and really help me understand how you think or how you think about work and strategy. And there you mentioned, I think I bring to collision this question because I think it will help to develop all that you already said, and you said this thing about the fourth. Well, there's like these four or ingredients that consultancy should have, and ones that say that strategy should be collaborative, should be also emotional and moral. I think that approach also was like kind of mind blowing for me, that you take these topics because not everyone got it. So if you can explain, I think it will help like kind of developing all this train of thought you were talking about.
Yeah, it's part of what I call humanizing strategy and also whole person consulting. And because we have made strategy, maybe even business at large, but also consulting, into kind of a left brain activity, a rational, analytic, calculative, economic driven activity, where the idea is we need to be neutral, objective, from a distance, look at what is objectively true, what is the data telling us, and then basically almost calculate the right decision and make that. I think that's another cause of so many failure, because the real world is not like that. The real world, real organization consists of real people, and real people are not just rational calculating machines. They are real people. So they have emotions, they have a body, they have also a right brain where they're creative, where they can think holistically. They are social, so they're also moral, ethical. So everything that makes us human is what we bring to the office, to the factory, to your workplace every day. So why not use that full potential in strategy as well? And that's what I try to do as a consultant as well. Is part of it is, of course, the establishing a good relationship. When you have a client that you get along good enough to trust each other and kind of depend on each other, but also in a process, when I work with a client, I try to bring in a broad variety of people, not just the top, but from a good representation of a company. And what I'm much more interested in their gut feel, their beliefs, their values, their aspirations. So their value, their moral, the rules, the norms they have, because that is so important for a strategy to emerge. So that's why I think what you refer to is a recent newsletter where, say, soulful strategy, a strategy that kind of deeply matters. And that means that strategy is basically an act of meaning making. So we are giving and creating meaning. If we do it properly, we want to create meaningful organizations. And this meaning means cognitively, so that we basically understand, we have a common understanding of what we're trying to do as a company and why. But also emotional, is that we feel that this is really meaningful. It touches our hearts. It makes us feel excited. Because if you miss that part of strategy, it can be theoretically a great strategy and on paper and let's say profit-wise maybe. But if it doesn't excite and motivate people, it's not going to work. And the last one is the moral, the ethical part is very important as well, because we're not just there to create a profitable business. We're there to create a meaningful business that has a meaningful, hopefully positive impact on society, on the community, on the stakeholders, on the world at large. So you see, it's a much richer whole person approach to strategy than we are used to from the textbooks and the, let's say, traditional approaches.
Yeah, and I love it also that you bring the moral and ethic. Sometimes we are full of pragmatism, or we're full like, oh, everything should be numbers, numbers, and numbers. And you see sometimes people exhausted, or the employees are kind of, okay, we will not reach the number this year, or we want to, or this quarter we are like running out of gas, and we can do it or we feel like we can do it anymore. So I think this is something that should bring once again to the table. I mean, there's many people and many organizations that really actually believe, as you say, to be inspirational, but there's some others that only want to do or kind of the rational thing, you know. I see it a lot. I mean, in Monterrey we have many human organizations, but also there's like this narrative that we have only been pragmatic and everything should be numbers.
I think just as a human being, that applies to consultants, but also to everyone else, is you have a responsibility. You have an individual personal responsibility to make this world a better place. And that sounds very big, but I don't mean it that big. But in everything you do, you want to make a difference. You want to make a positive difference. And it means that also as a consultant, you cannot simply, is my conviction, my belief, you cannot simply be instrumental and say anything goes. Like, if you have the possibility, and you do have the possibility as a consultant, to kind of steer, shape, influence a company in a direction that is, let's say, morally, ethically better, then I think you have that responsibility. And I don't mean preaching. I don't mean telling like, hey, you should this and this. No, much more informal, implicit, kind of help them move, guide them in the right direction towards become a truly better organization.
Yeah, and I really love this concept that what we'll do. Parenthesis, we organize here a TEDx event, so we are like very like the narrative of TED, and they say always the ideas worth spreading, and we love like this concept of you like whole person consultant. We think like it sound with us, and also like this idea we're spreading. Can you tell us a little bit about this concept of whole person consultant, please?
Yeah, which is, I think, basically what I just said, but maybe in other words, it's really bringing your whole self to the table as a consultant. So not try to be the instrumental facilitator, because that's the interesting thing is, I think in the past and in the traditional consulting, you are supposed to be kind of objective and at a distance, almost exchangeable, because you learn a specific set of techniques and methods in order to help the client. And I think, and if we go back 100 years and look at the history of consulting, I think what we try to create is kind of replaceable, identical people that can do the same trick with many companies. Yeah, and I think as a consultant, you also are an individual. So of course, I'm an independent consultant. I work freelance, so there it's probably a bit easier. But even if you work for one of the big consulting companies, the part that's most interesting, I think, is not what you learn from the company and not the methods and the tools and the techniques, but it's who are you? What do you bring to the table? And giving that a proper place, that's one aspect of whole person consulting, like act as a whole person, but also when you work with a client, with the people working at the client, treat them as whole persons, not as data sources, not as someone to extract information from, but someone that is involved, that is engaged, and that is influenced by the strategy process. That's why I sometimes say that the social part of the strategy process is even more important than the content or the intellectual part. And that's what I experience quite often with clients, is that when I talk to a CEO, he or she may have quite a good view on where to take the company. But that doesn't mean the company is ready to do that. It doesn't mean the people around him or her are ready to do that. So what you need is a participative, engaging process where other people kind of become part of the idea and contribute to the idea, and together, step by step, develop the right mindsets, and they become ready for implementing the strategy. So also there, it's also accept that the people that you involve will also be the ones that will help executing it. So you also have to think about what it does to them, how it changes their relationships, their positions. So yeah, again, it's a whole person approach from all sides. From my side as a consultant, but also from the client side.
Lovely, and I think that helped me, and also to introduce the other question, because I love it, and I see in the practice also, and we already kind of talk about it, but you talk also about the four types of consultants. That is called more the expert one, the neutral, the facilitative, and the observer. And I was thinking about it, and I said we can have a little bit of these skills or these capabilities, but it's also one dominant sometimes. Okay, from this I feel more expert, but I don't know if you. We need a little bit of these skills, and also to be a consultant, or you can just explain that it can help, like also outside consultancy, and I don't know if it also help to evolve, or I don't know if you see more like an advice to the organization, choose what you need or choose what you want.
I think you're referring to a typology that was developed by McKinsey. So I posted about that indeed. And it's definitely not a black and white, try to fit in one box. And I think that applies to most of these matrices. It's always, you can combine, you can kind of be in between. And so they're more like a theoretical ideal type model than describing the real world. But it helps us understand, like, where's my balance personally? Like, how am I more the expert, or am I more a facilitator? Am I more an active contributor, or more at a distance and more an observant? And one role is not better than the other, I think. All have their purpose, and you can probably change from maybe even from one client to the other, or from one phase of the process to the other. If I look at myself, I'm never an expert type of consulting, in the sense that I pretend I know the company, I know the industry. So my clients, they should know their company, they should know their industry. I am the strategy expert. So for me, it's often a combination of being a facilitator and a strategist.
Mm.
What I mean is facilitator. If I look at let's say the first part of the process when I work with a client, I'm quite neutral and also quite kind of, let's stay a bit at a distance. And what I want to do is help them speak out, get their thoughts, their ideas, their values, their experiences, their judgment, get that on the table. So it's much more, I'm facilitating a conversation, a dialogue between them so that they speak out and share everything that they know about the company, their aspirations, and so on. Once I have all that information, I become much more the strategist. So what I try to do is put myself in the shoes of a client, having heard all of the things I've heard in a couple of sessions in the week before, and then basically be a ghostwriter. So put myself in their shoes and develop the strategy on their behalf. And that's where I'm much more than just a neutral facilitator, because I'm kind of putting the strategy together, not as an advice, but as something I write on behalf of them. So again, I think the ghostwriter is a good metaphor. So where would I fit in this model? Probably somewhere on the expert facilitative part, but then expert as strategy expert and not industry or company expert.
Lovely. Yeah, I think, and I don't know, sometimes you kind of touch that point, but kind of I see frequently is that organization says, okay, we don't have time to do strategy, or they kind of get in the inertia and they never stop, and they say, okay, we go, or they take what they did the last year that actually it helps the last year and the last year, and they do the strategy the same way through all the years. I don't know, how can you say that if we have time of you, or if you have in front of you the decision making person of team, what do you say to them in order to okay, we can actually do strategy a different way, or how can you kind of explain the process you're gonna do with them?
Practically, this doesn't happen so often in my case, because whenever they find me, they are already ready. They are already aware, because otherwise they don't reach out to me.
Yeah.
But I do recognize the issue, of course. This is also, if you would look in my book, the Strategy Handbook, the very first step there. So out of 9 steps, so it's a complete process, including strategy and execution. The first step is activation. And it's exactly what you talk about, is getting strategy on the corporate agenda. So making clear that this is important. And it depends a little bit on what is the cause, the reason why they are not paying attention to strategy. If they don't see the importance, then what may help is do an exercise like, okay, suppose we don't change anything the next 5 years. Will we still survive? Will we still exist in 5 years? Probably the answer is no. And that might create a sense of urgency. But sometimes it's not the sense of urgency. It's just the lack of imagination that it could be different. So people who have been in the company, it has always been like this. So what are you talking strategy? There is just one way, it's this way. And then the solution, it doesn't really help to put more pressure and show the urgency. Then you have to open up their mind and show there are alternatives. So you have to kind of prepare, like, okay, but this is how we do it. But let's look at, for instance, some of our competitors or companies that have changed radically over time. And there's plenty of examples of that. Help them understand that things could be different. So there's, I think in the chapter, I think I mentioned 5 or 6 different reasons why there is inertia, why companies do not pay enough attention to strategy. I think the main step is then find out what is the reason and then do something about it.
Yeah, and that and that is awesome, and bring me to a question too, because I don't know if you see in the, well, everyone has like their own perspective, but that's right. It requires another fresh approach and leadership too, or the if there is like this vicious or virtuous loop of the business schools that also do kind of the some like the old-fashioned way, or like trying to be only the for. I also look for an article that you say like the difference that there shouldn't be some difference of the bosses, the leaders, they have all the role, but I don't know if you think that we are in a crisis, or you say, or there's some signals of change or some renaissance that you say, okay, this could be different, and you see in your expertise or your work people that actually doing differently.
Yeah, I think crisis is a word used far too often, and also like disruption and complexity and radical change and uncertainty.
Yeah.
I always try to kind of have a grounded response to that and say, okay, is it really that bad? So I think that's that really helpful first response is kind of let's see if it's really that serious. On the other hand, there is what you describe. I think there is quite some dogma still in the field, and that's in textbooks and MBA programs. Whenever I ask about, and I often start when I teach, like people's definitions of strategy, and what you get is kind of always the old-fashioned. Okay, it's our dot on the horizon, and what do we need to do to get there, and then when they start talking about strategy, it's about SWOT and Porter's five forces. And so that's very old stuff. It's 40, 50, 60 years old stuff. It doesn't mean it's not useful, but that's not the core. So we have a very dogmatic approach that kind of has turned into almost a ritual. Like we need a mission, a vision, a strategy, and core values. Why? Who has told that? Who has shown that that is effective? And what's the difference? So, and what is driving me in all I do is kind of break through that dogmatic, old-fashioned way of looking at strategy and do it differently. Also, because we know, I think there is no mystery. We know from research what works and what doesn't work. We know the reasons for failure, and yet so many people kind of insist on this old way and this traditional way of doing strategy. So, and I do think there is slow change, because what I do now, of course, is a bit of a straw man approach, like simplifying the traditional approach and pretending that everyone is doing it wrong and I'm doing it right. Of course, it's not like that. So I think there are many changes, especially more attention to execution. We see that, I think, a lot. I see that also at consultancies, also openness at clients, that it's actually allowed to ask a consultant to help you with execution. Because if I look back at like more the beginning of my career, I think the assumption was much more like it's acceptable to hire a consultant for the strategy part, but the execution we should do ourselves. Then it often went wrong because there's no dedicated person responsible, or not a team responsible. So, and if you don't have that, if you don't have someone to really lead the execution or implementation process, it quickly erodes, and then everything has been basically a waste of money and time, because nothing really changes. So there is, I think, step by step, there is some change. There are good developments, but it's extremely slow.
Yeah, and I completely agree with the last statement. You say that you should follow. You don't have to let die that good intention of you and execute, and and bring your people to execute and have this ownership. I think that's key. And I think, well, we have like pretty good conversation, and we have like, I think, like a coffee someday. But I think I would like to close our conversation with our checkout question about your image of the future. What is your like kind of your preferred future or your best case scenario in the professional way,
Mhm.
in the personal way? What makes you?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe the fascinating thing is I don't really believe in long-term plans
Uh-huh.
as a strategy consultant.
Yeah.
So that's also what I try to develop with my client is more like a joint strategic view, like what could the future look like? And this is
Uh-huh.
also how I work. I already used the metaphor of a surfer.
Okay.
So my current main aspiration, main intention is scaling beyond myself. Because
Mm-hmm.
when I work with a company, that's nice, it's good for the company, but it's just one person, one company. And I have invested quite a lot, time-wise, especially to develop my own approach. I've written some books. So what I'm currently really focused on is in finding different ways to scale that through other people. So you're in the beginning, you referred to Strategy.Inc, which is a recent initiative where together with Tim Teriyaki, we are basically training other consultants in our methods. So
Wow.
then they can help their clients. So that's a much bigger impact
Yeah.
than I would have just on my own. Also talking to some software companies, like how can we turn my method, my approach more into software so that more people, more companies can benefit from it. So that's one main direction is more anything that helps me scale my impact.
Mhm.
And the other is a gradual development that I've seen, that I've experienced in myself over the past years, is more and more attention to the let's say the meaningful part of strategy, to the purpose part, to sustainability, to ESG, to anything that really is important beyond being a successful company. So that's also why you see my recent posts are because the concept of whole person strategy or whole person consulting, the concept of soulful strategy, all of that is relatively recent that I'm so explicit about this. And I do expect that this will be an important driver for a lot of work for the coming years as well for me.
Lovely, and you're doing great, and also I well get to you with thanks to your articles and things you share on LinkedIn. I think it's a good platform to expand, and I see that it is bring you good things to you, and hope that all your message and way of working get to many people, and it's also generous of your part that you are like kind of helping another consultants also,
Mhm.
and that I think is a good thing also, like that you have like this legacy in other colleagues. So that is a
Mhm.
pretty good thing, and congrats and thanks for that too.
Yeah, thank you. And it's one of the other ways I do this indeed is kind of because I've built up now 20 years of experience in strategy, and to share that in kind of small bite-sized posts. I love doing that. It's great to see how many people like and find it useful, and also how much really interesting dialogue you get while
Mm.
doing that, which is also yeah, I'm learning from that, and yeah, that helps me prepare for my next steps as well.
So thank you, Jeroen, for from being here. It's been a awesome conversation, and that we can also uh, put face one on one, and hope that someday we can meet in some part of the world, and also
Mhm.
be in touch on the networks. But it's great to have you here. Thanks a lot too for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the great questions and for having me in your show.
Thank you. So, pues muchas gracias a todos por escuchar este episodio. Espero que te haya gustado muchísimo. Ya sabes, puedes dejarnos los comentarios. Puedes también contactarte en las redes que ponemos aquí de Jeroen. Bueno, ya saben que Reinventándonos Podcast es un podcast dirigido por un servidor Luis Salas y producido por Polymath, una red de consultores que co-creamos organizaciones ambidiestras. Pues bueno, pues ve a reinventar algo. Thank you a lot, and see you soon, Jeroen.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Ciao.